The next event, Pilate gives them the choice between Barabbas and Jesus, who he's going to release. John just goes right into, you have this custom that I should release to you one at the Passover. Will you therefore that I release to you the King of the Jews? They cry, not this man, but Barabbas. Very short in John. Matthew and Mark have the custom stated by the authors, but not spoken by any of the people here. So it's kind of like a narrator. Now, at the feast, the governor was wont to release to the people a prisoner whom they would, and they had then a notable prisoner called Barabbas. Therefore, when they had gathered together, Pilate said to them, Who will you that I release to you, Barabbas or Jesus, which is called Christ? For he knew for envy they deliver him. And then the story of his wife saying, I had a dream, but it goes back into the chief priests and the elders persuaded the multitude that they should ask Barabbas and destroy Jesus. Which of the two? They said Barabbas. So it's more explained in Matthew, especially with that added story of his wife coming in and saying, I had a dream. That's only in Matthew. Mark has it pretty much like Matthew, like a narrator. Now at that feast he released to them one prisoner, whomsoever they desired. And there was one named Barabbas, which lay bound with them, that had made insurrection with them, who had committed murder in the insurrection. And the multitude, crying aloud, began to desire him to do as he had ever done to them. So here in Mark, since that was their custom, for some reason the people are crying out to have Barabbas released. It's almost as if the crowd chose Barabbas to be the one released, as if they were trying to convince Pilate this is how serious they are. We know that guy committed murder and started an insurrection, but we don't care. We would rather have him than Jesus. The multitude, crying aloud, began to desire him to do as he had ever done to them. Then it has in verse 9, But Pilate answered them, saying, Will you that I release to you the King of the Jews? For he knew that the chief priests had delivered him for envy, but the chief priests moved the people that they should release Barabbas. So again, it seems as if it's the crowd. The chief priests moved the crowd to initiate the idea of Barabbas being brought out. Because of that, I need to have this narration first. Or at least very early, before Barabbas is ever mentioned. Luke, however, has a longer statement from Pilate. And Pilate, when he had called together the chief priests and the rulers of the people, said to them, You have brought this man to me as one that perverts the people. And behold, I have examined him before you, and found no fault in this man touching those things whereof you accused him. No, nor yet Herod, for I sent you to him. And lo, nothing worthy of death is done to him. I will therefore chastise him. This is the mention of the scourging. I'm pretty sure that's what it means. Chastise is punishment, which, since he's not going for crucifixion yet, I only imagine he's talking about scourging with a whip. And then it mentions, For of a necessity he must release one to them at the feast. It's very short. It's even added in parentheses, verse 17, like from the narrator. And they cried all at once, saying, Away with this man, release to us Barabbas. And then again in parentheses, who for a certain sedition made in the city and for murder was cast into prison. Pilate, therefore willing to release Jesus, spoke again to them, but they cried, saying, Crucify him. So then it goes into him agreeing with the crowd. So, we have the narrator from Matthew and Mark saying this is the custom, that someone would be released at this time. And Barabbas was in prison. And then when all the people were gathered, Pilate speaks about releasing Barabbas. But Mark clearly says during the narration of the tradition, the people called for him to do as he had ever done. I'm pretty sure they're talking about this releasing of a prisoner. And then when it has at the end of this narration, the people gathered together and Pilate beginning to speak, I think that would be a good place to flow into Luke. He had called the chief priests and the rulers and the people together and said to them, he's kind of going through what has happened already. You brought him to me. I found a fault in him. Herod found no fault on him. So, I'll just punish and release. I think that's the best way to put it. After the narration from Matthew and Mark, and also I'll combine that with John. Right before he says, I will chastise him and release him, I'll have John, but you have a custom. So he's mentioning, I found no fault in him. Herod found no fault in him. But you have a custom. This custom is that I'll release to you one at the Passover. And then instead of saying from John, will you therefore that I release to you the King of the Jews, I'll have, will you therefore that I chastise and release the King of the Jews. That way, he's kind of giving them a little bit of what they want, judgment for this guy, even though he doesn't agree, saying, I'll whip him and then let him go. Good? Are you good? They'll respond, no, it's not good enough. Send us Barabbas. So, beginning in Matthew and Mark, now at that feast the governor was wont to release to the people a prisoner. Mark has, now at that feast he released to them one prisoner. So he released, or he was wont. That actually makes more sense, because wont, W-O-N-T, is underlined and explained as accustomed. And that makes a lot of sense. Instead of just he released, it's more explained. Luke has, like I said in parentheses, verse 17, for of a necessity he must release one to them at the feast. I can't see how that fits with Matthew. If it was his custom, or if it was some kind of requirement. And to be honest, I don't understand how it could possibly be a requirement, because if the Romans are in charge of Israel, if they've conquered, and Israel is now a conquered nation, there is no requirement for them to release one of their prisoners. I mean, unless it came down from Rome where they said, we know we conquered these people, but on their holiday of Passover, release to them a prisoner. Perhaps there may be some history of that I don't know, but I think I'm going to go with Matthew. He was wont or accustomed to release to them, like that was just his gift. In John it says, you have a custom. Okay, well, I totally forgot about that in John. You have a custom that I should release to you one at the Passover. Well, that kind of fits both. It's the custom and should, which would be a good replacement for of necessity. So I'm just going to go with John. You have a custom. And because of that, I'm not going to have the verse from Luke, for of a necessity he must release one to them at the feast. But I'll combine how I can, verse 17, with Matthew and Mark. Now at that feast the governor was wont. Or now at that feast. Matthew and Mark both have that, but the word that is in italics. So I think I'm going to go with Luke, the feast. So now is Matthew and Mark. At is all three. The from Luke, and feast from all three. Matthew has the governor was wont. Luke has he must release. Mark has he released to them. So only Matthew explains who this is, the governor. So I'll put that. Was wont to is only Matthew. Release, and I can't have release from Mark because that's a different word. Released. With a D at the end. Past tense. To them one prisoner. Matthew. To the people a prisoner. So two is both. Luke, of a necessity he must release one to them. So two is actually all three. Two. And instead of them from Mark and Luke, I'm going to have the people from Matthew. One is Mark and Luke. Prisoner is Matthew and Mark. Matthew, whom they would. Mark, whomsoever they desired. I think that's better. Luke must release one. Just Matthew and Mark, whom they would or whomsoever they desired. Both Matthew and Mark, whom Mark has soever. They is both, and just Mark desired instead of would. Matthew and Mark and their Luke, for of a necessity, he must release. Okay, release is in Luke. One to them at the feast. That's everything. I'll stop there.